What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So as we're all hanging out right now waiting for that direct-to-air here later on this morning, I figured I'd have Newswave go up a bit early since we do have some information that's got out yesterday around some of the things we can expect in that direct. So normally 8 a.m. Eastern today, though, 6 a.m. Eastern, and we'll go over some of that stuff here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Yacht Club as they had an entire presentation unveiling new Shovel Knight stuff and one tease that has people really speculating on maybe the direction of that franchise. And then we'll also be talking about Todd Howard, who had a very interesting interview, but also sort of talked about the future of Fallout and what some of their plans are now that it had a massive spike in popularity. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members to the channel do get Newswave even earlier than today. If you'd like to learn more about that and support the channel further, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Lords of the Fallen, not necessarily Lords of the Fallen from 2014. They technically released Lords of the Fallen again, using that same name, just a new game. Technically, it's a little weird, but now we have confirmation that a sequel will be following this most recent release. But there's one caveat to the whole thing. We can see this posted up. This is over on WCCF Tech, who says the sequel to 2023's Lords of the Fallen was confirmed as part of a release via the Polish financial media outlet Bankier. Now, in this release, it mentions it's an Epic Game Store exclusive throughout the game's life cycle, which means it's not going to be a timed exclusive. It's also going to be, we assume, on consoles and that sort of thing, right? So on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, S. It's coming out in 2026 after all. But Epic Game Store exclusive for the entirety of its life seems like a bad idea unless they just got so much money that development is basically completely paid for, and then they can make up whatever sales they can then on the Epic Game Store as well as on consoles. Because like when Kingdom Hearts came out on Steam, people act like that's the first time it's ever come to PC, and that's just kind of the way it is with Epic Game Store. The majority of people still just use Steam, so I'm curious how this will affect Lords of the Fallen 2 in general when it comes to sales, with PC, I think, being much, much smaller than it would have otherwise the Steam release. Oh, and speaking of Steam releases, Baten Kaitos 1 and 2 just randomly came out yesterday. There's a full trailer for it here, and this is the game that came out at the end of last year on Switch, and now it just made the jump over to PC on Steam. It's currently priced at $45. Keep in mind, of course, there's two Baten Kaitos games moved up to HD, and while they are just pretty standard remasters, these are still very unique games. So I will tell you this, you're probably not going to have played an RPG quite like this one ever before. And if you look at the system requirements on PC, very, very low. Like, if you've built a computer in the last 6 or 7 years, it should run this fine. And if you're on like the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally or MSI Claw, anything like that, you'd be able to probably lower the power draw and get a better battery life out of it with this kind of a game. But really cool stuff, and yeah, I recommend it. Again, it's a very different take on just the RPG genre, using the card system as well. So interesting stuff there, though, to see it just kind of randomly pop up on PC out of nowhere. Oh, and with the most recent update for Starfield, we've seen mods kind of come into the scene, which does include a bunch of performance mods, and it's even managed to help out the Xbox Series S quite significantly. So we can see this video that was posted up over on X from Pirate Nation, but either way, they do show off some of the footage here with the game running up to 120 FPS on Xbox Series S. That is like the roof that it's able to hit. We know that the Series S is capable of 120 hertz in some games. Starfield, though, has been a mixed bag in general for consoles, but they did have a recent update that pushed it up to 60 FPS on things like the Series X. And with the recent mods, they're titled Uncap FPS for Series S, Performance Tweaks, Performance Shadows, Remove Grass, Crowd Reducer, No God Rays, basically are turning everything off seemingly for the game. It is able to touch up to 120 frames on the Series S. That seems to be kind of I don't want to say a rare occasion, but it's not going to sit there consistently. It'll be much lower, but just kind of fun to see what is a very budget-minded system with the Series S be able to at least hit that frame rate in something as demanding as Starfield. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with that Nintendo Direct that will be happening a few hours hours from the time that this video goes up, and there are a lot of expectations around what would typically be Nintendo's E3 time period. I mean, we do look to those presentations specifically as having some big time announcements, even now this late into the Switch's life cycle. You figure they're going to have something lined up for the holiday season, and maybe that is Metroid Prime 4, or maybe something else that's a bit more out of left field. There's a lot of possibilities with what Nintendo wants to do as they work to bridge the gap to their next generation device that I think we will find out a bit more for maybe at the end of this year, kind of holiday season. But of course, leading up to this presentation after it was announced yesterday, a bunch of the usual suspects popped up online, giving us indications as to maybe a few third-party announcements and, yes, one major first-party title. Let's start, though, here with PRO, who just woke up online, of course, kind of hinting at the idea of a Nintendo Direct happening this week, which did get announced, and then they started to do things like retweet Darkest Dungeon 2, which has been rated for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch in Brazil. That was a posting from Gamatsu back in March, just maybe giving us an idea, indication that, hey, this might be in that Nintendo Direct this week. So yeah, there you go. Darkest Dungeon 2 most likely will be in there as just a third-party announcement. We also have Silex Hunter, who at one point in time was a bit more active and throughout, I'd say, some pretty good information here and there. But they've certainly been referencing quite a bit when it comes to Metroid and Samus, almost indicating that, wow, go figure, Metroid Prime 4 should be at this event. I will tell you this, if Metroid Prime 4 is not at this event, I think there's gonna be a lot of questions around that franchise. I mean, it's very weird that it has been this long since they even announced that Retro Studios had to come in and reboot the franchise for this game, Metroid Prime 4, right? The reboot for the development. And it still hadn't been shown. This seems to me like the last real presentation before Nintendo starts talking about their next system later on this year. We also had a PRO retweet what seems to be messaging around the idea of a new Ace Attorney game, or an Ace Attorney game of some kind being here. Fire Emblem's also expected. Remember, we do have that Dragon Quest HD 2D, but I guess that was from Midori. However, others have sort of chimed in and said, yeah, that seems to be something we can maybe anticipate here for the Direct. And if you remember, that was apparently going to be the first 3 games for the Dragon Quest series, kind of mashed into one with that HD 2D engine and that style. So that would be really, really cool to see here. But one that I am very excited, because I want to see the reaction to this entire thing. Nate put out a podcast with MVG, and again, if you're looking to kind of kill time leading up to the Direct happening later this morning, I would give this one a listen. It's like an hour or so long, but in there, he does mention, and this has been kind of thrown around before, that Fantasian will be at the Direct, and Square Enix has actually partnered with Mistwalker to put this game out, publish it, pretty much across the board. So you can expect it on PlayStation, on Xbox, and we've even seen SteamDB listings for this game. So yeah, you can probably expect it on PC as well. All this being announced, not necessarily at the Direct, as what you'll see is it'll be announced at the Direct for Fantasian, and then we'll have a press release, I guess, from Square Enix and Mistwalker detailing the other systems it'll be going to. And if you remember, that's a game that's been pretty much stuck on Apple Arcade completely, and there were like there was like part 1 and part 2, and I guess they're just gonna mash them together and release it as Fantasian. But with it being locked away on Apple Arcade, very few people have really been able to play this legitimately. So I've noticed those comments come up. It's like, yeah, I wanted to try it, but it's just on Apple Arcade, and I haven't had an opportunity to. So we will most likely be seeing how it could do on something like the eShop, which I think it will probably do pretty well there. And then, of course, on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. So fun stuff. And again, we'll see what Nintendo has maybe from a first-party perspective with things like the Zelda games, those remasters, those ports of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker being expected, and maybe some others. So exciting stuff, and we'll see what they have later on this morning. I will be doing a reaction video afterwards, kind of go over some of the big announcements and give my thoughts. Next up, let's talk about Yacht Club Games and their presentation that they had last week. And I wanted to come back to this when I had a bit more time, because they had quite a number of announcements here. A lot of it, yes, being geared around Shovel Knight, but at the end of the presentation, there was a tease that has a bunch of people currently speculating. So let's start from the top here with Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope DX. It is basically the deluxe edition, kind of like remaster sort of Shovel Knight, the original one there. But they now have 20 playable characters that'll be added, online multiplayer, new features like rewind and save states. It's currently up on Steam for wish list, so we'll hopefully hear more information about this one later, as just currently marked as coming soon. Really, really good entry point, obviously, for people who are interested in Shovel Knight, but maybe they wanted something that's been a bit more modernized or just more content added in. Then we have Shovel Knight Dig, Wicked Wishes free DLC, that's coming summer 2024. Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon Paradox Pack, it's free DLC, that's also summer 2024. Mina the Hollower was shown, but they really didn't have any new information out. I'm holding out looking for that release date or release window for Mina the Hollower, because it does look legitimately interesting, sort of that top-down Zelda sort of perspective with apparently a Souls-like twist on it. So again, I want to know more about when we can play this game. Then they have new merchandise, live events, cameos, and more coming up. And at the end of the whole thing that, again, has people talking, they teased what appears to be a new Shovel Knight game that'll be in 3D. And the reason we're kind of thinking that is because they showed the logo, right? And then they did this sort of animation where it made it look 3D on your screen. And that's basically all they said. A new direction for the franchise. Like, oh, okay, wow. Shovel Knight in 3D. We've seen Shovel Knight in different games. I believe Shovel Knight was in Yooka-Laylee as technically a 3D character, right? But the idea of taking that 2D platforming that is very, very good in terms of control, like tight, responsive, and I'm curious how that would translate necessarily, because we've seen like the older collectathons try to come up to modern times, and it's been hit or miss. Like Yooka-Laylee, when that came out, was just okay, and now they're going to try to redo it again. I do think it's going to be a very difficult thing to make work, similar to the impact that they had with Shovel Knight in general when it came out as a 2D release. But I'm certainly interested to see them take on that challenge, and I hope it works out well, because Shovel Knight has been a franchise that has just continued to grow and grow and grow, and I think it can be one of those big franchises sort of in that 2D, 3D space where it still has that indie flair to it, but continues to build out larger and larger products, maybe like a 3D experience. So we'll keep an eye on that one. It seems like it's still a bit of a ways off. First, though, we got to see what's going on with Mina the Hollower, hopefully later on this year. Next up, let's talk about Todd Howard and some information around maybe the next Fallout game, because of course, with the Fallout series on Amazon, it exploded in popularity, even with people who didn't necessarily play a lot of the Fallout games. We saw numbers across the board for the franchise really blow up in terms of concurrent player count. Well, there was a recent interview that was really well done by Mr. Matty Plays with Todd Howard, and these interviews are a lot of fun to watch. This one was a bit over an hour long, but because Matty has been so entrenched sort of in that franchise, but also just the company in general, the studio, really following them with all of their different projects, he's very knowledgeable, and I think he's able to connect much better than most media outlets could with written interviews or stuff, in this case with just Todd Howard seemingly in a Discord call, kind of going back and forth about all different parts of whether it's Starfield, Bethesda as a whole. There's just a lot of info there, but I did want to pull one piece of that being about the next Fallout. This was transcribed by Insider Gaming, this from Todd Howard, where he says, for other Fallout games in the future, obviously I can't talk about those right now, but I would like to say, sort of rushing through them, or we need to get stuff out that is different than the work we're doing in 76, we don't feel like we need to rush any of that. Right now, the Fallout TV show fills a certain niche in terms of the franchise and storytelling. I totally get the desire for a new kind of mainline single-player game, but those things take time. I don't think it's bad for people to miss things as well. We just want to get it right and make sure that everything we're doing in a franchise, whether it's Elder Scrolls or Fallout or now Starfield, that those become meaningful moments for everybody who loves these franchises as much as we do. And I'm sure there's hindsight in general going on within Bethesda, ZeniMax, Microsoft even. It's like, if only we did have that Fallout game ready, right? But he's correct in the sense that, look, it's very popular right now because of that Amazon series, but there'll be a season 2. Let's be real, there'll probably be a season 3, a season 4. Those opportunities will still come around, and Fallout in general is just this massive universe that they've built out over time. So rushing something just so it's there next to, a series, yes, now that's popular, but over time it'll start to kind of wane and it'll fall back down in terms of the numbers. But we'll have season 2 and season 3, and then who knows, maybe Fallout 5 will eventually make it out at that time, but I feel like we're still a ways off from Fallout 5 because Starfield just came out, Elder Scrolls 6 needs to release, and then we go to Fallout 5, so we're talking next generation either way, looking at just kind of the timeline. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there is some sort of spin-off for Fallout. I think that would make a lot of sense because the franchise is that big. You might as well have some other offshoot titles that can sort of go alongside of it and yes, sort of work to bridge the gap there. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Netflix gaming, which I know, but give me a minute here because there is an interesting thing that's happened here as we've gotten some statistics around downloads for a certain game or certain set of games that went to the service. These would have only really been accessible on mobile devices though, so on iPhone or Android. And that's the Grand Theft Auto trilogy. If you remember, that was announced for the platform and then it went there in January. And those versions were actually in some ways better than the ones that were released on consoles. Just very, very weird stuff. But it seems that they've actually done really, really well in terms of the downloads for it. And remember, these are all on just mobile devices that have Netflix installed. You go through Netflix and then there's like a gaming tab and then you can download it from there. And I think it just pulls it from the Play Store or like the iPhone iOS store, but we can see this posted up. This is over on Eurogamer, where they say now several months down the road, that being from January, that number has increased over 30 million Netflix downloads for the GTA games. According to AppMagic data compiled by mobilegamers.biz, San Andreas has had 20.5 million downloads to date, Vice City has had 6.5 million, and GTA 3 has had 3.3 million downloads. The majority of these GTA downloads have been on Apple devices. Meanwhile, most of the downloads were from the US. That's pretty massive, 30 million, and as the publication notes, this means GTA is the biggest game series released through Netflix to date. And there were reports before that the reception to the Grand Theft Auto trilogy on Netflix has sort of made them a bit more interested in the gaming aspect. So obviously Netflix, massive when it comes to just video on demand. Godzilla Minus One randomly just showed up one night. They announced it 4 or 5 hours. It was pretty quick. They announced that night and then it released later on that night. So, I mean, it was a nice surprise if you're a Netflix subscriber, but you may have also just subscribed for Godzilla Minus One. And in this case, you may have subscribed to play Grand Theft Auto Trilogy. I guess it's possible, but Netflix seeing those sorts of numbers, that kind of engagement is enough for them to continue down the path, I feel like, and maybe even accelerate it somewhat as they are looking for other ways to grow. I think their big play will be whenever cloud gaming gets to a point where it does feel one-to-one with like native experiences, and I think we're still a ways off from that one. So maybe they'll tread water and try to do more of these downloads on mobile, and maybe eventually they get to a point where they can even have it download to or set up on your TV through streaming with a controller and you can play there too. But just don't be surprised if you see more of these sorts of announcements for big franchises making their way to Netflix gaming, because I have a feeling they're going to make some pretty big investments here going forward after seeing this. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, will Metroid Prime 4 release in 2024? 87% say no. All right, 13% say yes. I have seen some say that, oh, Metroid Prime 4 is the big holiday release. I've been kind of leaning that way for a while. I will admit, though, at the last minute, I'm kind of hedging a bit. I do wonder how people would feel if Metroid Prime 4 ended up as a 2025 cross-gen release, kind of like Breath of the Wild. Like, what if it did come out on the Switch 2, but then also the current Switch, and it just missed this holiday completely? Or Nintendo themselves with Retro were like, maybe we should make this go to the next system as a big showpiece, because Metroid Prime in general has been that game that you can look at as like technically impressive on whatever platform it released to. So whether it's the GameCube or the Wii, I mean, or even the Switch, you could say the Switch with Metroid Prime Remastered, this is a very impressive looking game on the hybrid device, right? So maybe that's their strategy, but I'm hoping we find out today, because come on, it's been so long since Metroid Prime 4 was first announced, 7 years. It's been 5 years plus since it was announced that it was being rebooted. I think here in 2024, June, it's finally time to get another look at it, and I think it's also time to put some sort of release date or release window on it. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from RV Odyssey, who says Nintendo is not going to show their new device until at least January of next year. If they show it before that, they're going to be afraid that it's going to hurt their holiday sales, and they're not doing it. So I will tell you this, I think Nintendo is going to have a hard time hitting their current projections for the Switch, was like 13 million or something like that. They're gonna have a hard time, I feel like, getting even above 10 million for this current fiscal year, even with different games that they would be announcing. I think we're to a point where so many people have a Switch that if you want one, I mean, you just have one. Now, it doesn't mean they won't have trickle sales over the next 3 or 4 years and eventually get to, say, 160 plus million sold. I don't think there's just as much of a rush to go out and get the system as there was 4 years ago, obviously, but we do see pretty steep declines in terms of Switch sales, especially in the US, not as much in Japan, but that decline is already there, and if it continues that way, Nintendo may as well announce their next system, if it is lined up that way, as I think many people are now thinking the first half of 2025, that new system will come out. You might as well start to set the table like they did with the Switch, have a trailer in October or November maybe, and then set things up for a big presentation to kick off 2025 and that eventual run with marketing, the whole thing for its release later on. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the Nintendo Direct coming up? Let me know some of your predictions or some of your hopes and dreams for what can be announced there. And then also, what about Yacht Club Games with their presentation for Shovel Knight? What do you think that last tease was for the presentation? And how long do you think it'll be until we do find out about Fallout 5? Are you thinking like 2030 or maybe even beyond that? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.